one of the things I wanted to talk about was the model that we might use to combine some of these programs. At USDA, we have a $200 billion portfolio, but there's only a small part of that that's available for renewable energy, and a very, very small part of that which potentially goes into digesters. But there are opportunities to work with the EPA AgSTAR program and NRCS, their EQIP program, to promote these digesters. So again, it's a partnership, it's a collaboration, and with some form of collaboration, it's possible to take advantage of loans and grants and even payments. So every RD program through our energy programs does some type of support for digesters. It could be through the Advanced Biofuel Payment Program or repowering assistance, or it could be even innovative projects through the Biorefinery Assistance Renewable and Chemical Bio-Based Product Manufacturing Program. And of course, they can utilize the REAP program as well. So first of all, why start with EQIP? I mean, one of the reasons is that EQIP has a program that defines a good roadmap for conservation practices. And this is a great place to start because there's so many components that come into putting together a successful incentive program. EQIP is a program that allows you to determine if there's a need, and that need could be defined by a practice, and that practice in this case would usually be in managing manure. And so a manure management plan would be good to put in place, and we'll see how that can be used later, but you can combine programs, and then you could use funding from EQIP, and you could fund your project with REAP as well. So we would ask you to check with NRCS about developing this type of plan and see how they could combine those practices. And you could assess through this potential area how you could build a digester, even working with AgSTAR. And then the last piece would be to consult with RD about loans and grants if it is viable. So a little bit more about the REAP program. It's a competitive loan and grant program, and it offers loan guarantees to qualified lending institutions for energy assistance. Very important to have a lender on board. Typically, an applicant can receive up to, but no more than 25% of eligible project costs as a grant, and they have to contribute 25% of their own funding, but they can obtain 50% of the loan from a lender. There could be other formulations of that. But in recent years, we've seen an enormous growth in our loan-only portfolio, and it's mainly from solar projects, which are totaling hundreds of millions of dollars. So when Nick talked earlier about the potential to grow biogas so that it almost rivals solar, that would be something that we would welcome. It would involve some breakthroughs, but it's possible that we'll get there. Here you see sort of a schematic of how the programs work. So if you have a established conservation need from EQIP, you could still apply for a REAP grant. And REAP can make an award up to $500,000. There's no guarantee of that for a renewable energy system such as a digester. In such a case, you could have a $1.5 million from other sources, and the borrower would contribute $500,000 in a guaranteed loan of $1 million. But again, the grants are competitive. There's no guarantee of obtaining the maximum funding for a grant. And therefore, a couple of strategies would be to ask for less to increase the odds of getting the funds, and ask for maximum as a gamble because it's competitive, and they could reduce your award if you're amenable to taking that. So you'd have to really get together and kind of see how you might do that. The reporting requirements for the grants are on a semi-annual basis, and they're spelled out in 4280 subpart B. We look at the outcome for 3 years once the construction is completed. And the measurement and verification, again, is spelled out in the instruction, but it is a voluntary reporting system once a grant has been awarded and a project is completed. So how do you apply for this type of system? You go through one of our state offices with REAP, and it's I might have missed something in scoring, so I'm going to go back here. I guess not. The slides are in a little different order, but we'll manage. So you want to contact one of our state offices and talk to our energy coordinator. If you need assistance, contact me. We have 47 offices, so some of the offices like Florida and Puerto Rico share an office, and so on. And again, these programs work together because the manure management piece or an irrigation plan could be a funded practice through EQIP, but that which puts compressed natural gas or a diesel genset that puts electricity to the grid would not be eligible under EQIP, but it would be eligible under REAP, and you could still satisfy all the legal requirements and combine the programs. And that's a very effective way of utilizing the maximum number of government incentives. Here are some examples on how that's done. You have a diesel to electric funding. You could even get RUS to put in a line if you needed an electric line. So it's possible to use an RUS program from RD, a REAP program, possibly even EQIP incentive as well. It's also possible, if you're in a digester business, to get a cash amount of working capital awarded, or to do a digester. If you're like Farron Farms and you need access to other capital to get a business and industry loan. And so that's another possibility for certain types of projects where you could easily borrow 5, 10, even 20, up to $25 million. Most of the states have authority for just about 5 million. Some have 10, but the maximum guarantee is usually 60% on the larger loans and 80% on the 5 million or less. So that's another possibility. And these are government guaranteed loans, so they're actually coming from a financial institution, and our program is simply writing the guarantee that the loan doesn't go bad. The terms for B&I loans are 30 years on real estate, 15 years or useful life of equipment, whichever is less. Maximum term on working capital is not to exceed 7, and the interest payments only are scheduled in the first 3 years. Loans have to be fully amortized. Balloon payments aren't permitted. So who can apply for these programs in terms of the lenders? They have to have a legal authority, sufficient experience, financial strength. They can be federal or state chartered banks, savings and loans, farm credit banks, or credit unions. Where there's a combination of projects, if you've got multiple dairies involved, is one of the projects that Nick alluded to out in California. It's possible that RUS could provide a loan if there is a rural electric cooperative that wanted to build a larger digester and it had enough feedstock from multiple farms. It would be something that would have to be regulated by the utility. It would be a rural utility that would have a need. And in that case, rural development could make a direct loan. And one of the advantages there is that it would be a pretty low rate, very, very competitive rate, probably below what you'd see from a commercial lender. They might be 6, 7, 8%. RUS probably around 4%. But it's very hard to put together that type of project, but that is a possibility. So let's talk a little bit more about the Rural Energy for America program and their loans. You see that they offer a minimum amount of $5,000 up to $25 million. There's up to an 85% loan guarantee as opposed to 80. Rates and terms are negotiated with the lender and subject to USDA approval. Uh, Terms for real estate are the same, machinery and equipment, capital loans, pretty much the same as B&I. Maximum term is 30 years for combined real estate and equipment loans. So what you have is an example of combining the practice standards and approved implementation plans with REAP as the best way to do it. And while we can't do the exact same thing twice, we can combine the programs so that you have separate projects. So again, you could have manure management plan, maximize the incentives from EQIP, and combine that with a possible REAP grant. So you get the maximum bang for the buck. So we can work together to manage the land and use our forests wisely and to be more energy efficient, as well as to produce more energy, renewable energy. And that's how the Rural Energy for America and the environmental equality programs can work together, specifically if they're approved to do that. So I know everybody wants to look at how these are scored if you're looking at a grant. And again, the maximum amount is $500,000. And digesters tend to score pretty good because of the quantity of energy that they produce. So it's very possible that you can get 25 points. And environmental benefits, you're probably not going to have a very difficult case in making that. We can talk to you about individual scoring criteria, but there are 5 points that are easily obtained there. Commitment of funds is worth another significant amount of the competitive scoring criteria in the grant scoring. And there I would suggest that you squarely, firmly have a letter of credit or commitment of funding subject to bank approval. So working with a bank, a credit union, a farm credit lender is very important to enter into a REAP application so that you have the funding locked down. And you're not going to do that unless the project makes a lot of sense. That's a huge amount of points. The size of the applicant as a rural small business, large cooperative wouldn't score that, but a lot of farmers that have small herds, they would easily qualify for the 10 points. If they are not a previous grantee, they would get 15 points. There's a potential for state and administrative points, and then the payback. They may not get 15 points because a digester could take a few years to repay for itself. It's probably not going to be something that is going to score very, very quickly, have a 2 or 3 year payback. But 10-year payback will get you some points, and it should be possible to do. So again, one of the reasons that USDA has been interested in this area is that we wanted to have a partnership to manage CAFO. And in 2015, we awarded $12.5 million in grants to support the installation of 17 digesters from California to Maine. And when operational, those systems were projected to produce 167,000 megawatt hours of renewable energy. And that's the direction that we'd love to be able to go in, utilizing EQIP and REAP guaranteed loans and possibly grants. And so we've made this commitment to the EPA to work with them and to work with individual applicants to move in that direction. It has tremendous potential for rural development, construction jobs, add value in small communities, and produce renewable energy. So the livestock partnership is basically something that has produced over 150 digesters. We've made an investment of about $500 million. They've reduced emissions. And we have a permanent program in REAP that is only waiting for allocated money, appropriations money, and we have over $500 million in guaranteed loan funds and about $50 million in budgetary authority for grants every year. Some of that's for 20,000 and less. Some of it would easily go to this. And it's allocated to the states, so some states have less money, but they do tend to fund digesters and have an interest in that. So the procedure here is to talk with EPA AgSTAR, use their resources, consider NRCS for a manure management plan, and lastly, to get engaged if you have a viable project that you want to put in an application to get involved with RD. We think that there are workshops and tools that are available, and we think you should use all of the resources available, see if you can combine government incentives to make these projects happen. Thank you very much for the opportunity to present.